Welcome to the Busy Signal. My name is Jim, and this is my retrostalgic 80s, 90s, and early 2000s podcast. This show aims to salute all the stuff from back in the day that is now extinct or quickly going that way. Hey everybody, I just want to start this episode off by saying thank you. Thanks to everyone who has listened to this podcast, subscribed, followed on Instagram, liked, reshared posts, and commented, and definitely thanks to everyone who has rated and reviewed and subscribed on Apple and Spotify. We're everywhere, but really thank you for all those that took the time out of your day to rate and review. We appreciate that here at the Busy Signal. And when I say we, I'm really including all of us because this is a community we're kind of building here. Just old school, retro, nostalgic stuff that we just want to talk about and remember. You come here, it's a cool space to do that. So thank you. This is episode 20. For a bi-weekly podcast, that's almost a whole year. And it's been crazy fun deep diving into all the cool stuff from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. So many memories have been unlocked and dusted off. It's been really awesome talking to old friends about all this cool stuff. It's also been just really a bunch of fun talking to everybody and interacting with you guys over on Instagram. So far in the past 19 episodes, we have covered a lot of stuff from back in the day. We've covered 80s and 90s snacks, old school home fitness gadgets. Then there were the things that were super commonplace and are now extinct. We've gone there. We've taken a nostalgic sound tour. We've dug around in the old toy closet a few times. There's plenty more to dig around in there, by the way. And we've even remembered things that never even happened on the Mandela Effect episode. And my point is that we have so much more to talk about. In all of these episodes so far, there's barely been a whisper of video games. And video games are a massive business. And in the 80s and 90s, kids lived through the video game infancy. We lived through the growing pains of that business. We lived through the console wars. We had to choose sides. Were you Team Nintendo or Team Sega? So that's what we're talking about today. Video games. And I'm bringing back friend of the show, Kory, to talk about our first video game systems and the games that we had for those systems. So welcome back, Kory.
Hey now. I like that.
You like that?
Yeah, I felt actually like once the door opens, I'm allowed in. So thank you for welcoming. Yeah.
You were in the waiting room. Welcome back. So we're talking video games. I started with a Nintendo. What was your first system?
My first was also a Nintendo, but we've gone over that age gap thing before.
Right.
So you're an 80s kid. I'm a 90s kid. Well, I was born in 89, but that don't count. That practically makes me a 90s kid. So completely different generations of, but it's still the same system being our first. So right. I'm sure we both had different experiences.
100%. I'm 81. You're 89. So that's enough to make a difference, but still have completely different experiences with the same system.
So I'll start with my actual origins of video games in general. My first knowledge of video games came from a little show on TV called Nick Arcade. Do you remember Nick Arcade?
No.
Okay, so it was a Nickelodeon show where basically they played arcade games, but it somehow was virtually, and it was just up in that par of Global Guts, Legend of the Hidden Temple, like that type of thing. But it would air on like Saturday mornings, and that was once in a while they'd have challenges where they'd have to like, hey, you're playing this on the Sega, whatever the heck. So that was my first introduction to that video games even exist. I came over probably in like the 90s, saw Nintendo for the first time. My cousin was playing hers, and I was like, well, what is this? You know, this little guy, we all know him as Mario, and just watching this, you start from the left and you go to the right. And it was just, well, I want to play that. The rest from there is history. That my first system was Nintendo. My first game that I ever played was Mario 1. It doesn't get any more clear-cut, simple than that, but I could still tell you that story from when I was like 3 or 4 years old in 2024. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. My first experience with video games was arcade machines. Like you went to the pizza parlor, arcades. You went to the mall, there was arcades. There was always some random arcade machine somewhere. The grocery store would have like arcades. So I kind of grew up seeing video games in the wild, and the Nintendo came over to the US somewhere like 84, 85, something like that. So my first Nintendo I'm pretty sure I got that in 1987 for like Christmas.
Okay.
What will the future bring from Nintendo? More hits like Super Mario Brothers. Arcade hits like Kung Fu. Nintendo has the most video game hits. Hogan's Alley, Duck Hunt, and more like baseball and Excite Bike. And you can play them only on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you're playing with power.
That is how I got into video games, because the console came with a game. Technically, it came with one cartridge, 2 games, Super Mario Brothers / Duck Hunt.
Yeah.
And it was a killer combo. I loved Super Mario Brothers. Like you said, it's a side scroller. You're going from left to right. Super Mario Brothers is legend, obviously. What came with your first Nintendo?
Well, being that it was in the 90s, I got it used. So mine didn't actually come with a game. It came with whatever games were purchased for me. And what was purchased for me was Mario Duck Hunt.
Nice.
Mario 1, Mario 3. Sorry, Mario 2, Mario 3.
So you got the trifecta right out the gate.
By the mid 90s, those are all readily available. So I mean, you could at the time go buy everything used.
Let me guess, Funko?
For sure, it was Funko.
Yeah,
that was the place. Especially if you wanted used stuff back then. Nobody was buying things online, but you could go to Funko. There was one a mile and a half from where my house is now.
Nice. All right, so out of the 3, let's just talk about the first one.
Sure.
The first one, I feel like, set the bar for modern platformers. It was revolutionary. I mean, I still have my Nintendo, as I said. I don't even know if it works. I don't think I've played it in like decades, but I'm not letting it go. It's there. But Mario, the Super Mario Brothers, the replayability in that game, they have ported that to every Nintendo system since the NES. And for good reason. Anybody can pick that up and play within seconds. My dad would sit down sometimes. He was pretty half decent. And then, of course, for like days, he'd be like whistling the tunes. That's the thing. The music, the soundtrack to Mario.
Without question. Without question.
That game holds up all around. Then there's Duck Hunt, the other side of that cartridge. Not like you flip it over, but the other half of that cartridge, Duck Hunt. How do you feel about Duck Hunt?
Well, from a 4-year-old's perspective, I had no clue what I was doing. I was just trying to aimlessly shoot a gun at a TV where my dad, who was an actual cop, loved Duck Hunt.
Wow, okay, yeah. I liked Duck Hunt. It was good for about 10 minutes, and then I wanted to go back to Mario because eventually the ducks got too fast, and then before you know it, I'm up against the television with the zapper, and I'm just cheating at this point.
I mean, and that still didn't always work.
No, and that's the thing. And if you weren't playing the ducks, there was a clay pigeon. Do you remember that? There was a clay pigeon option. And those things were even smaller and harder, and I hated it.
Those were fun, though.
Yeah, it was fun. And then you got that dog.
Was there a name for that dog?
You know, maybe. Maybe there was a name for it. There probably is.
Somebody right now is screaming it as they're listening to this.
All I remember is that stupid laugh and giggle that it would do at you. I feel like if there was ever a misstep, a missed opportunity, you should be able to put that dog down. That would immediately end your game because now you don't have a hunting dog, but you should be able to put that dog down. That thing was just nasty. Man's best friend indeed. Where are we going next?
So I'm going to go with the first game that I ever received as a gift that was brand new. And I didn't have many of these. This, in fact, might actually be the only brand new Nintendo game that I got. And it was Double Dragon 2.
Double Dragon 2, The Revenge. Raw power for your NES. 9 incredible missions. 2-player simultaneous action. Double Dragon 2 from Acclaim. The best action game ever.
I compare it a lot to the Simpsons arcade game.
Okay.
The same idea, where it's here's a level, people come in, you kick them, you punch them. You only have 2 buttons, really.
It's a classic beat 'em up.
And then once they're gone, you eventually get the boss. If you can beat the boss, then you go on to the next level. I can tell you for a fact that I never beat that game. But I sure as heck tried to so many times.
I don't doubt it. That is a good game. So here we go. let's take it back a couple years. My next game, it's Double Dragon, the original Double Dragon. I saw this game in its original form, which was an arcade cabinet. And I just remember the graphics just blew me away. All the characters were larger than life. The big muscly bald guys were just especially just extra. It just looks so cool. And I feel like it's a beat 'em up side scroller with a little bit of platforming. The music for Double Dragon is incredible. And if I remember, I'm going to insert some right here. So what I did was, when I found out that Double Dragon was being ported to Nintendo, I saw the commercial for Double Dragon. I saved up all of my allowance. All of my 9-year-old self saved up as much money as he could. This one is another one that holds a special place in my heart. It was ported to all the systems, and I played it so much. The fighting mode, the beat 'em ups were just so satisfying. And it had a 2-player mode, which I feel like beat 'em ups are a lot more fun with 2-player mode. 1 player is good, but you get somebody else in there and it cuts your enemies in half.
Right. I was going to say even with 2, because I never played 1, I'm pretty sure that it never added people. So basically you just had somebody else to help try and get through the game faster or easier, I guess.
Absolutely. And we'll touch on that 2-player versus 1-player mode in another game that I have as well. But basically, anytime I play Double Dragon, I can beat the first 3 levels with my eyes closed. There's only 4 levels, and that 4th level cranks it up to 11 for almost no reason. But when I think about it, I understand the reason. It's a port of an arcade game. Arcade games were designed to eat your quarters. You're not supposed to be able to beat this thing in one sitting, and you have to keep feeding it quarters. So the Nintendo game was pretty close to that, because the 4th level introduces things that are in none of the other levels. And the boss, in order to beat the boss, you have to fight like 4 of each character that you've encountered throughout the levels. Like there's 4 of them all of a sudden. You have to beat all of them. And then he comes out and he has a machine gun. None of the other characters ever had a gun. All you are is a martial arts fighter, and now you're fighting against a gun. It was impossible. I never beat that game without cheat codes. That was a thing.
And then the other issue that you'd run into with all the Nintendo games is they didn't have save options. So it's basically once you run out of lives, you're back to square one.
There were very few games. You're absolutely right. There were very few games that had the memory capacity to do save files. A game like Double Dragon, no. If you needed to, like, all of a sudden it's dinner time and you're playing Double Dragon or Super Mario Brothers, what are you doing? You're pausing it, turning the TV off, walking away and hoping that nobody messes with it.
We have all been there.
Yeah, you get up early in the morning, you're trying to play some Mario, it's time for the bus. Pause it, turn your TV off, and hopefully nobody messes with it. Come back from school, you pick it up right back where you were. The other thing, the last thing I want to talk about Double Dragon is the fact that it had a one-on-one fighting mode, which I had never seen before. The graphics were infinitely better during that one fight mode because it didn't have to have things moving around. You were in a stationary place. The fighting was not the best, but I'd never seen that before. Like, fighting games weren't a thing yet. I want to say that this is one of the early iterations of like a fighting game that maybe made the way for like a Street Fighter to come along. I don't think Double Dragon 2 had that mode.
I don't believe it did either. That's why the whole time you're thinking about it, I'm trying to think in my head. And I wish that I would have gone back and done like a watch through, because I know that they exist on there about Double Dragon 2, and I don't recall there being that option in the second one.
No, and I didn't have Double Dragon 2. I ended up with Double Dragon 3 at some point, which was a good game. It was fine, but it wasn't Double Dragon.
All right, so being a avid pro wrestling guy and kid, I always needed to have the wrestling games. And there are several wrestling games for the Nintendo system, a lot of them under the old WWF ones. None of them are as good or as cheesy as the original WrestleMania game.
Now watch me waste the Macho Man with acclaimed WrestleMania for the Nintendo Entertainment System. A leg drop, an elbow smash, a body slam!
WWF WrestleMania from Acclaim!
Ooh, yeah, I want a rematch.
Yes, you're right. It's so cheesy, but it's so classic.
It's almost like you have the 4:3 ratio of a TV with full screen, and I'd say maybe the bottom eighth of your screen is this small little ring and whatever two wrestlers you have, and then the next sixth of the screen is just black. There's nothing on it at all, and then at the top is just really grainy, obviously 8-bit pictures that they have in there of who it is and their name and I guess whatever. And when you think where those games have gone all these years later, there's not even a single crowd. There's no crowd.
No.
But like that didn't matter back then. I believe that first game came out in 1988 or 87.
That sounds about right.
Based on the rosters, it has to have been that time. But it's legendary. It was one of those things where as they continued to make games, I think they made games for the regular Nintendo up until like 93. I think they even came out with one.
They were still making Nintendo games after the SNES had come out.
Right, because again, being a wrestling guy, I believe the last one they did was the King of the Ring, which had a Nintendo and a Game Boy release, which that would have been in 93, and it was still just like, what are we doing here? Stop trying things with this platform. And I have all those games, again, guilty pleasures, but the one that I would always play more when I finally obviously got it was that first original WrestleMania one. Hulk Hogan on the front, just tearing open the shirt.
Yep.
You know, doesn't get more 80s wrestling than that.
Who was your go-to in that game? Who was your go-to wrestler?
Well, obviously Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, I liked Hulk Hogan, but there was something about Bam Bam Bigelow.
Well, yeah, which is crazy, and this is even going on a tangent. He was with the company for maybe like 6 months tops, and he ended up in that video game, which just shows you how cool of a character is. He's just so, as they refer to it as these days as toyetic, but in that situation he was not the classic guy in like black trunks. The dude had flames tattooed on his head.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
His whole suit was all flames.
He was only with them for 6 months?
Yeah, he came in like October of 87, and he was out by like March or April of 88.
That just blew my mind. I feel like he was there for a lot longer than that.
They brought him back in 93, but
oh.
But I mean, if you're only talking about the 80s, he came in, they put him right with Hogan, and then he was out quick.
That's crazy. I just learned something there. But that game, I feel like most people, I never owned it because I feel like most of my friends already had it. So if I went over their house, we were playing that. That is a great game. And the cover art, like you mentioned, that cover art is legend. Have you ever heard of Marble Madness?
No, sir.
Marble Madness is a weird game. You are a marble. You're put in this like maze kind of like obstacle course. You have 30 seconds to get your marble through the maze, past the obstacles, and finish. And the idea is you want to do it as quick as possible because each level gets harder and it requires more time. So if you have any time left over at the end of your run, it gets snowballed into the next level. If you fall off the screen, you lose a few seconds when they put you back on. If you fall from a high height, your marble will shatter. You lose a couple seconds. If you hit an obstacle that does damage to you, you lose a few seconds. So your time can get whittled down pretty quickly. And then it's just really easy to restart from the beginning. The thing that I think is unique about the game is that even before you play the game, you have to choose your controls. You get to choose 90 degree or 45 degree. That's the kind of angles that you can make as you're turning. One is a lot tighter than the other one. Like I always choose 90 degree. So I did not like the 45 degree. That was really too tight. I needed a little bit more wiggle room, especially in some of those later levels. So by the time you hit level 4, it's really hard. That's a game where I wish there was a save mode.
I wish this game existed on like my phone because it would be great on a plane.
I would look that up if I were you. You never know. By level 5, nothing is right. Everything is the opposite of what you've learned the physics are. Gravity doesn't work right. The controls are backwards. So like up is down, down is up. Your D-pad is completely backwards and flipped. And things that normally would have taken away time actually give you a couple seconds now. But it's so weird and circus-like to get through this 5th level. There's a 6th level. I hate that level. It's so hard. I've never beaten it. I think I've gotten pretty close once or twice, but I've never beaten it without using a cheat code. I'm one of those people. Like before YouTube, there was no playthroughs. You had to find the cheat code if you wanted to see the ending. That's just what it was. So yeah, I'm not ashamed. I used a cheat code to see the ending. I don't think it's any different from, YouTube, you're watching somebody else play it. I actually want to play it and see the ending, so I'll use a cheat code.
When you're ready for a real challenge, you're ready for Marble Madness. There are deadly steelies, marble munchers, acid pools, digital waves, vacuum cleaners, catapults, pistons, pounding hammers, killer birds, and they're all after you. Do you have what it takes to reach the silly maze where everything's upside down, or the ultimate maze where even the maze moves? Do you have what it takes, or will Marble Madness make you lose your marbles? Marble Madness. And coming soon, Jordan versus Bird, one-on-one for your Nintendo.
Marble Madness. Look it up. It's a fun game.
Next up is, I don't know if you would have ever played this. It was Play Action Football.
I've heard of it. I don't think I've played it, though.
So this wasn't Tecmo Bowl, but this was Play Action Football. It was actually licensed by the NFL, which it said on there, but they still couldn't use the actual team names. So the players were on there were actual NFL players. There was only 8 teams, so you'd have like San Francisco, Denver, New York, Miami, Chicago, and there was only I think 8 teams. And earlier today, when I went and pulled out my cartridges, which was a whole kind of nostalgia thing in itself, I said to you earlier, actually, I don't even remember how this game plays. So I looked up a run-through on YouTube, and from the very first image where it's got all the copyright stuff, it goes right into an overshot of the field, and the national anthem kicks in, and all of a sudden it came back to me. It was an insane, it took me back. Everything about it came back to me in that instant. The fact that the referee only says first down and touchdown, and it's really horrible, but you can make out what they're saying.
Yeah.
The fact that the game is shot on a weird diagonal angle that they refer to as a 3D angle. It's really weird. The certain sound effects for when you'd kick the ball, it would basically have a high-pitched noise with the ball would go in the air, or the interception noise. It all came back to me instantly. Needless to say, me and my brother played a lot of play-action football in the 90s together. And also, needless to say, I don't think I ever actually won a game.
Man, I never played that one. That sounds like a fun game, though.
It's nothing great. It's no. I feel like the GOAT form of original football video games is Tecmo Bowl, but I didn't have that.
No, I didn't either.
So what I had in my house was Play Action Football, and today I got a lot of nostalgia. I got those 90s feels 25 years later, yeah.
All right, here we go. Here comes my final game for this episode. I hate this game. This is not one that I remember fondly. This is a game that was gifted to me that I wanted, and I was bamboozled. 1984, I didn't get this in 1984. I probably got it in more like 88, 89, Ghostbusters. And I pretty much got most games either for Christmas or birthdays. So I wanted my games to be as good as possible because for the next 6 months, that's what I'm going to be playing a lot of. And I was a huge Ghostbusters fan. I had everything. I had all the play sets growing up. I had the Firehouse, Ecto-1, the Proton Pack, the PKE meter, all the figurines, a trap. I was big into Ghostbusters. So for Nintendo to have licensed a Ghostbusters game, I was in. This is up my wheelhouse right here. So I get it, and I'm just super jazzed. I remember opening that package, unwrapping it, and it was just a black box with the Ghostbuster symbol on the front. Tore into that box, threw that cartridge into my Nintendo, and the first thing you see is a black screen, the Ghostbuster symbol, and you hear, Ghostbusters! It was the worst voice I'd ever heard in my life, but it sounded amazing to me because I was like, oh, it talked to me. That was the first time a Nintendo game had said anything to me, and I was like, oh, it said Ghostbusters. It really sounded like somebody was gagged and put in the trunk of a car. That's what it sounded like, or at the bottom of a well, But I totally ignored that and had my freak out moment. I'm like, this game is going to be amazing. Not to mention the 8-bit version of the theme song was really good for the first 1,000 times. just replays and replays and replays and replays, and not in a good way. That's kind of like where the fun ends. This game is so bad. It's ridiculously bad. It's just lazy bad. It's a top view of city blocks. You get buildings, and your PK energy, your psychokinetic energy in New York City is starting to rise. And people are starting to call the Ghostbusters. So when they call, one of the buildings starts flashing red. And now you've got to drive. So you get in your Ecto-1, and now you're at this little road. It kind of looks like Spy Hunter, where you're just driving along through the road. You're driving to the call. You're driving to that building. But oh, by the way, don't run out of gas, because if you run out of gas, your car stalls. You pull to the side of the road, and then you don't get to go to that call. If you make it to your call, Ghostbusters get out. They've got their little proton packs. It's kind of cheesy, the streams that they're going with, the proton streams. You catch a ghost, you lower it down into the trap. That's kind of it. And then every once in a while, you have to empty your traps. You have to drive back to headquarters to empty your traps. In order to advance in the game, you have to catch a lot of ghosts. In the beginning of the game, you're given a certain amount of money. So you have to buy gear. You go to the gear store, there's things in there that don't even exist in the movie, like a ghost vacuum. There's no ghost vacuum in Ghostbusters. You don't vacuum ghosts. There's a trap or a super trap that can hold like 6 ghosts. It's just making me madder and madder. So eventually you catch enough ghosts, and now you get to go to that main building where Zool is. And if you remember in the movie, nothing is working in that building, so they have to travel up all those flights of stairs. This game stays true to the movie. You have to travel up several dozen flights of stairs, one step at a time. You have to get all 4 Ghostbusters up these steps. So now you're 4 Ghostbusters long. So your character is technically these 4 Ghostbusters, and ghosts are coming at you from every which way, and they're hitting you. You're trying to catch them, but they're hitting you and killing your energy level. I never made it up the stairs. I've never seen the end of Ghostbusters. I never saw the fight with Zool. I'm not looking it up on YouTube. I hate that game. That game was the worst. I never want to play it again. I never want to hear that guy in the trunk going, I don't want to hear that. It's awful. Throw that game away. It's the worst game ever.
I just got PTSD for you.
We deserved a better Ghostbusters game on the NES. So that is some of the games I had. That is some of my favorite games. I even like to throw in one that I hated. And we have more to go. We have a second part to this episode. So Kory, thank you for joining me on this one. You pulled out some pretty rad games. Anything you want to plug before you bounce?
Real quick. I'm a live radio DJ every single Thursday night. I like to play the old music from the 60s through the 90s, all the dance club music, and we play them on the radio every Thursday night from 7 to midnight on 92.9 WZML. You can look that up on the Google machines through your Alexa and all that other stuff. Just have them play WZML. We go back in time every week.
All right, Kory, we'll see you. We'll finish this list of Nintendo games. Thanks again to Kory for stopping by and talking some good old Nintendo. The 8-bit fun doesn't stop here, though. Stay tuned. In 2 weeks, I'll drop part 2. Even more pixelated goodness for your ears. So if you didn't hear your favorite game mentioned in this episode, there's still a chance. You might as well hear it in the next. So maybe now's a good time to hit that subscribe button. Big thanks to those of you who have subscribed and even gave a positive rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Until next time, I'll catch you later. Cheers. Once again, I'd like to say thanks for listening. And as always, you can listen to The Busy Signal everywhere quality podcasts are streamed. Hit the subscribe button to have a new episode delivered directly to your favorite device every other Friday. If you really like the show, leave a 5-star rating or a positive review on Apple and Spotify. That lets everybody else know to come check out what you already think is awesome. You can also head over to Instagram and follow the show at Busy Signalcast for even more retrostalgic content. I share a good amount of fun stuff that isn't mentioned on the episodes. While you're there, say hi in the comments. Don't be shy. And until next time, remember, reach out and touch the past.